Good morning, everybody. Our recent presentations, several of them have talked about how important it is to have support when our children, our families, our loved ones go through special and unique challenges. And if you've had a family, which I think we all have had, we know there's always challenges. So one of the organizations that really does a lot of good things in our community is Youth Services of Tulsa. And their website says, like they say on their website, it's in the name. We serve Tulsa's homeless and at-risk youth. Since its creation, Youth Services has helped more than 300,000 youth in the Tulsa area. And today, by providing homeless and at-risk youth with a support network, we set them on a path to independence, and that's their goal. And so I want to introduce to you today Brian Young, who is the Associate Director of Development and Communications. He's going to talk about youth services and all the myriad of things that they do for the youth in our community and possible ways that you might want to get involved and help. So with that, he's got some brochures that if you don't have one, let me know and we'll pick one up in an empty chair and get one to you. I'll turn it over to Brian. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me here today. I normally have a pretty booming voice as it is and don't usually use a mic, so if I get too loud, feel free to motion at me and I'll try to tone it down a little. Again, my name is Brian, and I appreciate the opportunity to share with you a little bit about Youth Services of Tulsa. I've been with Youth Services now for 11 years, and before I joined them on staff, I was a donor myself because I just fell in love with their mission and their ability to connect with young people who other agencies were unable to help or who turned away. So I just really love the organization. I'm proud to be a part of it, and I love the work that they're doing, and I'm always happy to come out and share about what we do with others. So I always like to start out by asking, who has raised a teenager or has a teenager in their life right now? I figured I'd see lots of hands. Hands back up if you thought that was super easy. Yeah, so Youth Services was started in 1969, over 50 years ago, because we know that the teenage years are very challenging, not only for the young people who are going through a myriad of changes in their own lives and preparing for their future, and as all of you have probably experienced yourselves and then shared with your children or grandchildren, all the decisions you've got to make about your future, and that can be really, really stressful for the youth themselves. It can also be really stressful for the parents to make the change from parenting a small child to parenting a tween or a teen or even a young adult. And we're finding that young adults are staying at home much later in life now for economic reasons and such. So we know it's hard work, and we knew that young people needed help. So in 1969, a group of volunteers, primarily from churches, got together and they thought, let's come up with a way for young people to have a supportive environment where there's caring adults around, it's a sober space, it's a safe space, and they came up with the idea of a Saturday night coffee house, and they were providing support for young people in that way. And they very, very quickly figured out what we really need is counseling services for teenagers and for their parents, but especially for teenagers. And with that in mind, they incorporated Youth Services of Tulsa as a charitable organization providing counseling services. 1969 was a long time ago. Things have changed a lot. I was a teenager in the 90s, and things have changed so much since then. So as teenagers' needs have changed, so too have our programs and services. We've evolved. So now, not only doing counseling services, we do a whole lot of stuff which you're going to learn about today, not least of which is homeless services, which Cheryl shared a little bit with you today. So let's go ahead and dive in. This is our mission: to value and accept all youth, supporting and challenging them to embrace their potential. And one of the main reasons I love youth services so much is that phrase, all youth. We take that word all very, very seriously. We don't care what a person's circumstances are when they come to us, who's turned them away before, what their challenges are. We want to help them. And sometimes young people need a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance, and that's one of the things Youth Services is great about doing, is sticking with it until young people get it right and are able to move on. A little bit about sort of our accreditation. So who's familiar with the Tulsa Area United Way? Yeah, lots of hands there. We're a United Way agency and have been for decades. And I always like to point that out because to become a United Way agency, our programs, our services, our financials, all these things are very, very heavily vetted and reviewed by community volunteers who are not affiliated with us. So to become a United Way agency, we feel like that's sort of the gold star seal of approval from the community level. Plus they give us about 10% of our budget every year, which is also critical. But then also we have been accredited by the Council on Accreditation, which truly is the gold star seal of approval for social services agencies. So they come in and they do an even deeper dive than the United Way does, and they look very heavily at data, and they also interview many of our clients, present clients and former clients, and they interview our staff. And so to get that accreditation is a really onerous process, but it's really important to us. So we feel like anyone that's supporting Youth Services of Tulsa can do so knowing that we've been very heavily vetted outside of our own agency. So as I mentioned earlier, we've been around since 1969, so over 50 years. We started as counseling for teenagers. We now also do a lot of services for young adults. Our complete age range is 12 to 24. And I will have to say there's a little bit of wiggle room there because we also do serve families. So say for instance, we have a 13-year-old that comes in for counseling services, and maybe they've got a 10 or 11-year-old brother or sister. We might provide counseling services for them as well. But for the most part, we're really focused on 12 to 24-year-olds. Just kind of wanted to give you a preview of what the next year is going to look like based on numbers. So this year alone, we expect to serve over 17,000 young people. A couple of our projections actually have it closer to 20,000, so we'll kind of see. I like to kind of play on the more conservative side there. So about 17,000 young people are going to turn to us for help. For some of these young people, it's going to be really intensive one-on-one services. Some of them will live on one of our properties because they're experiencing homelessness and we provided housing for them, plus independent living skills and job training and things like that. Others might be a teenager who's currently separated from home because home is not a safe place to be right now, or they're in the foster care system and they're waiting a new placement. And for those young people, they might be in our care, living with us 24/7 for months. And then there's going to be some people in that number who we might just see one time providing some level of education. So that number is pretty big. We do it with a pretty small team. There's about 100 of us, a little less than 100 right now. And we keep a really, really tight budget. We try to run lean to make sure all of our programs and services are really getting the bulk of the dollars that come in. But we do a pretty good job, and that's primarily because of the fantastic staff that we have who really, really care about the work, and they care about the teenagers and the young adults. So about 700 young people will have received counseling services this year. That's just the individuals. That doesn't count their parents or their siblings who may come as well. That's just clients. And then we'll see about 500 different homeless youth who are living on the streets. Maybe if they're lucky, they might be couch surfing for a while. Is anyone familiar with couch surfing? Yeah, you kind of bounce from home to home until you run out of homes or people start asking too many questions. And most of the time, those folks unfortunately end up on the streets too. But most of these 500 that we're working with are experiencing homelessness right now. And they can come in Monday through Friday to our daytime drop-in center. We have a program called Street Outreach Services. They can come in and get a hot meal. They can take a shower. Right now, we're the only agency in the community that has private showers for these young people, which we think is absolutely critical, not just for their privacy and their safety, but just for human dignity. And everything that we do is based on trauma-informed care. We know that young people have experienced a lot of trauma, and if you're finding yourself homeless at the age of 17, 18, even 24, you have probably experienced really, really significant trauma at multiple levels. And every little thing that we can do to reduce that level of trauma, all the way down to just providing private showers, we try to do that. So we have probably about 20 different programs and services, and we think about them, we call it a continuum of care. Most people don't really know what that means. So we try to kind of describe it as puzzle pieces that fit together. Our programs and services fit together like puzzle pieces, and we're trying to help young people piece their lives together. And so these are kind of the 4 program areas: counseling, which we talked a little about, delinquency prevention, runaway and homelessness, and then youth development. And many of those programs, young people come in for one need or for one service, and we do assessments and we find out what all's really going on. And oftentimes they find themselves going through a myriad of programs or going through multiple at the same time. One thing I like, and I think I've mentioned already, is our programs are driven by data. So we collect lots and lots of data at every point that we can. And we also pull in youth perspective as well, and interviews with young people, and we have youth leaders, which I'll talk about more in a bit. And we let them help guide our programs and services along with the data that we receive to make sure that we're doing the right thing, that we're improving, because no matter how you go, there's always room for improvement. And so we find this data-driven focus to be really, really critical. And again, our primary goal for all of our programs is to help young people become independent young adults and to be able to live on their own healthily and happy. So this is our runaway and homeless programs. Who's heard of the Safe Place program? Yeah, anyone want to tell me where you see those signs at? Quick Trip, where else? Fire stations, libraries, great. We also have some mobile sites, IMSA ambulances. If a young person sees an IMSA ambulance parked and their lights aren't twirling around, they can ask for a safe place and get help. Tulsa Transit buses are a mobile site. A young person can hop onto a Tulsa Transit bus with no bus fare, nothing, and just say, I need a safe place, and they'll get a ride to either the nearest safe place site or to our shelter. And so the Safe Place program has been operated in Tulsa by us since 1991, and it's a national program, but we operate it for Tulsa County. And the idea is that with as many safe place sites as possible, you end up with a safe place in every neighborhood throughout the community that you serve. And again, we serve Tulsa County. And also that those safe place sites are within walking distance for young people who don't have transportation. And most of them are either open 24/7, so young people can get help any time of day, or there's a network in place that if someone shows up after hours, we can take care of them still. And so we have, I believe, 300 different safe place sites throughout Tulsa County, and young people who need help just walk in and say, I need a safe place, or sometimes they just say life has gone sideways or things are bad at home, someone is following me, I don't feel safe, and all the employees at all those sites are trained on what to do. And basically what happens is they call us, and then we look at a phone tree of volunteers, and we try to find a volunteer of the same gender who lives nearby, and we try to get someone out there within 30 minutes to pick up that youth and give them a ride to our shelter. They're not there to solve the problem. They're not there to ask a lot of questions and make the youth relive their experiences with a stranger. They're just there to provide safe transport in a time of need to our shelter where professionals can jump in and do the work. And then that brings us to the Adolescent Emergency Shelter. Those two programs, as you can imagine, work very closely together. And the shelter is there for 12 to 17-year-olds. It is a youth shelter, so that means on the young person's 18th birthday, the state says you're an adult now, you can't stay at this shelter with these other teenagers. And so we have to have plans in place to what to do with these young people when they age out of our shelter. But it's a place where they receive 24/7 care, they have a bed, there's counselors there, there's staff who are trained in what to do with trauma, youth with trauma experiences, and how to handle the family situations. And the shelter, if you were to come in for a visit, and I totally encourage that, we do tours, and if you're interested in that, I can talk to you about that later. But come through, and one of the first things you'll notice is that our shelter actually looks like a pretty peaceful, calm place with lots of opportunity for fun and games, because we realize if you're at an emergency shelter as a teenager, things are probably pretty bad. And while you're with us, we want to make sure that your stay is as pleasant as possible. Our street outreach services are for young people ages 16 to 24. It's for youth who are living on the streets. This is the program that houses the drop-in center I already told you about, where they can come in for a shower and a hot meal and lots of other services. As the name implies, we also go out onto the streets, and we try to find young people where they're at, where they're camping, maybe they're hanging out at an adult shelter, which, by the way, you might be surprised is really uncommon. Most teenagers and even young adults who are experiencing homelessness don't like to go to adult shelters. One, they just don't feel safe. And two, what we found from young people, this is our words, not theirs. The best way we can describe what they tell us is that most of them don't consider themselves homeless. If you were to ask them to describe themselves, they're not going to use the word homeless. And by going to an adult level shelter and spending the night on a cot with a bunch of strange adults, for a lot of these young people, that's the line that's crossed when you've given up and you start to accept for yourself that I am truly homeless, versus what most of these young people say, they're going through a rough patch, or they're sleeping rough, or they're just having a tough time, which is how most of them would describe themselves. But we do go to those places because youth do show up there from time to time. We go to those adult level service centers because some of them know homeless youth and know where they're staying and can tell us, or we can leave behind cards that have a map where to go for more help, and they will pass them out to young people that they might encounter on the streets. And so we also get calls from folks saying, I see a campsite and I'm pretty sure these aren't adults. Can you all go check on them? And we go out and we always take food. Young people who've experienced really significant levels of trauma, and again, if you're homeless as a young person, your trauma is probably through the roof. What happens is you lose trust of adults, you lose trust of anything that kind of smacks of the system. And so the first thing you have to do is to build trust with young people in order to help them. And that often starts with food, because you can give them food with nothing expected in return, tell them where to come to get more services. The food might keep them coming back until they're ready to really kind of try to reach out for additional help, at which point we're going to leverage the trust that we built to try to guide them through different services, including housing, employment, educational goals, things like that, to help them get stabilized and to become independent. Which leads us to the transitional living program. And this one serves ages 17 to 24. And actually, let me back up a little bit. On street outreach, I usually get questions about, why do you serve 16-year-olds there when you have a shelter with a bed that also serves 16 to 18-year-olds? Well, a lot of these young people who would come to street outreach experiencing homelessness under the age of 18 have been in the system, are probably technically in the system right now. Maybe they've run away. They've been in foster care. They do not want to go to another foster home or to another group home, and they would rather take their chances on the streets than to go back into the system. And if that's the case, if they choose to just receive drop-in services versus a bed, then we're going to meet them where they are and help them as we can, as we strongly encourage them over time to please go to the shelter where we can get you more help. But yes, that means we're going to contact a parent, or yes, that means we're going to contact the state. So some of those young people don't want that level of service, and we'll help them as we can. Back to transitional living program, that starts at age 17, because to get someone into housing often requires, if they're under the age of 18, some level of parental approval for signing leases and things of that nature. And that's really, really hard and challenging to get done. And so we're kind of limited in what we can do with youth under the age of 18. And we found with 17-year-olds, we find some wiggle room there and are able to do that. We've had very little success with getting 16-year-olds into housing without parental support or state support. So anyway, that's the age range, 17 to 24. What the transitional living program is meant to do is to take youth who are experiencing homelessness right now, put them into housing. It's a housing first model, because we know that until your basic need of having somewhere safe to stay is met, you're not going to be able to get and keep a job. You're not going to be able to go back to school and stay in school and meet your educational goals. You're probably not going to be able to attend counseling services on a regular basis. If you're experiencing substance abuse issues, you're probably not going to go through treatment unless you're housed. So we start with housing first. We own 4 different apartment buildings across town. We have not made this announcement publicly yet, but we're in the process of buying a 5th building, and we hope to open that up within the next month or so. And about half of each of those units in each building are reserved for youth experiencing homelessness, and the other half are rented out to the public at market rates. And there's a good reason for that. Before I started at Youth Services, when they started this transitional living program, they bought 1 building and they filled every single unit in that building except for 1 with young people. and then they put an adult staff person in that last apartment, and it did not go the way they expected. What they had really done was they recreated a group home experience, which was not a normalized living environment for a young person. It was not preparing them for living on their own out in the community, and we were spending program dollars that should be going to serving youth. We were spending those fixing plumbing and broken doors and broken windows and just general building upkeep. So we adopted a blended housing model, which allows us to, again, about half of the programs are for youth, half the programs or units are for the community, and the renters, they're paying for the upkeep of the building and the cost of owning property. Then we can focus all of our efforts on those youth who are housed there, focused on building their independent living skills, teaching them life skills they didn't learn when they were at home, like how to manage a checking account, how to shop, how to cook, little basic things like that, how to get a job and how to stay employed. So we focus on those things. They're with us for a minimum of 12 months. They can stay up to 24 months under certain circumstances. During that time, they commit to a couple of things. They commit to paying rent. It's 20% of whatever they earn, and it goes into a rental account. And they're told right out the gate that this is your money, and it's gonna stay your money. When you graduate the program, every penny comes back to you. So we're also going to encourage you to think of this as your savings account and start putting in even more than the minimum that's required so that when you move out, you've got lots of money handy for you to pay your deposits, first and last month's rent, maybe some educational expenses. So they're required to pay rent. Also, we know there's no free ride in life. They're gonna have to pay rent or a mortgage all throughout their adult life, and they need some help getting there and getting trained for that. They also have to commit to participating in peer learning activities where we're gonna focus on those life skills. And they have to write a plan, and it's a plan on how they're gonna move forward out of this current state of homelessness and into independence, and how are they gonna meet their educational goals, how are they gonna meet their employment goals, and then they're assigned a case manager. They're assigned an employment and education specialist, and those people work with them very, very closely to help them get on their feet. And then finally, we have health navigation services, which are built into our youth homelessness services. I'm sorry, did you have a question? Okay. So health navigation is there to provide medical care for youth who are experiencing homelessness. If you've been on the streets, you can probably imagine that you've probably not seen a doctor probably in years. As we talked about having experienced trauma and having distrust issues, we have found that young people who've been on the streets for a while don't even want to see the doctor when they have a significant medical issue. So it can be a challenge to encourage them to go to the doctor. So we have peer health workers who've experienced homelessness themselves who are doing better now, who can help make those connections with youth to try to encourage them to see the doctor. We have a medical clinic on site that's managed by OU physicians. And young people who are experiencing homelessness can come in and get anything taken care of that they need help with. We see a lot of burns, a lot of abrasions, a lot of cuts, a lot of illnesses that you would expect to see from anyone in the community. We see common problems that are related to homelessness, dealing with foot rot. And that's when you wear the same set of socks for days, and the moisture around your feet make your feet the skin start rot away. So they can get all the medical care that they need. But then it goes beyond just providing a clinic for them. It provides health navigation services, which means if they need specialty care, like they need glasses or contacts, or they need to see a dentist, and they probably do, or they need any other kind of specialty care, there's someone to make those connections for them and transport them to those services, arrange those services, help them with follow-up care and aftercare procedures, new appointments, and all those things. And then also navigating the medical care system can be really challenging for adults, especially when you start talking about insurance, when you start talking about sooner care, when you start talking about the marketplace for insurance. That can be challenging for most adults. It's especially challenging for young people who oftentimes have educational deficits, maybe even learning deficits. And so they can help them through that. And to just give you an example, a couple of years ago, we had 2 young people who came to us who were experiencing homelessness. Both of them had prior substance abuse issues. One of them needed 17 teeth extracted, one needed 18 teeth extracted. And imagine living through that pain, first of all, and the embarrassment of what your mouth looks like and you never want to smile, and doing that as a teenager. and then trying to imagine how are you going to come up with the money to pay for that, and you're homeless. So we worked together with Eastern Oklahoma Donated Dental Services. They extracted all of those teeth, and they even put in dentures for free so that they had a full smile for the rest of their life. So things like that are happening in health navigation. This is our social enterprise. This is a program that helps young people experiencing homelessness, but it's also a business. It's a food business. They sell street tacos. They started out selling breakfast tacos, started out selling them on tracks in downtown Tulsa, and it became very, very popular, and they quickly expanded into serving lunch tacos as well, and then into serving catering. And then the catering side has picked up so much that during COVID, when it wasn't really safe to be out in the public, we gave up track sales and just focused on catering. And now that health is beginning to be better, people are able to get out in person again, we're back to doing track sales again. But these are young people who've experienced homelessness. They're experiencing it now. Some of them we've gotten into transitional living, so they have housing now. We're providing technical training and job skills to help them learn how to have a job, but what we're really focused on are soft skills. Again, young people with trauma often have other challenges like conflict resolution. Think about your very, very first job as a teenager or a young adult. Your boss may have been an assistant manager who was a year or two older than you. And on the job, we all get those sort of corrective conversations, constructive criticism, how to do your job better. Well, when you're a young person who's gone through pretty much nothing but trauma, you take many things too personally, and those conversations often become sources of conflict, which cost young people their job. And so what we found was we were really good at helping young people get placed in jobs, but we were not doing a good job of helping the young people stay employed until this program came along. So their boss is also their case manager, and they're surrounded with a suite of services, from counseling services to substance abuse prevention services to housing to medical care, all the things that they need while they're working, earning money, and getting job skills. And our goal is to not keep them in T-Town Tacos for long. Our goal is for that to be a stepping stone into a better, longer career. But in the meantime, they're serving up fantastic food. It's absolutely delicious. It's low cost, it's available downtown, and it's available through catering. And these young people feel like they're part of a community. Some of the earliest feedback we were getting from these young people was that when they were on the streets, they often felt invisible. Or more often than not, people were afraid of them. So there was always people talking about, you see a lady walking their way, and they suddenly see the young person, and they clutch their purse a little bit tighter. People that will cross the street to avoid them, and then cross back to the sidewalk as soon as they pass them. These young people see that. They know what's going on. They know people are afraid of them. So by offering this job where they're selling tacos downtown, they're delivering catering to businesses, to churches, to organizations, they're meeting people in the community, and they're not feeling invisible anymore, which is also one of the great unexpected payoffs of this program. I would probably close on this program just by saying, if you do encounter a young person on the streets, know that there's usually nothing to fear. These are young people simply looking for opportunity and simply trying to make it in this world. So usually there's nothing to fear from these young people. We've talked a little bit about counseling services already, so I'll just kind of break down what the different areas are. There's family counseling and individual counseling, which pretty much kind of describes itself. But then there's community-based counseling, and that's primarily for young people who are court involved, and they've gotten into trouble, and part of their sentencing is to go through counseling services. And so we can provide those services in the community, at their home. We can do it at our office if they prefer, but usually they like to do that in a home. Sometimes we're going into detention centers and doing counseling there. Our substance abuse counseling services can look like prevention, where we're working with getting in front of groups of young people at churches, at schools, anywhere where we can get a group of teenagers or young adults together and talk about substance use and how it can turn into substance abuse and how it can impact your goals in life. And then it also looks like for those young people who are already experiencing substance abuse issues, we can provide outpatient counseling services to try to improve that situation. So there's some of the great things about this program. There's no waiting list, which is really rare for counseling services, especially if you need after-school hours. And we have after-school hours available. And then to make it easier for youth to get to counseling consistently, they can do that in Tulsa, Broken Arrow, or Owasso. And then, as I mentioned earlier, when you saw the puzzle pieces coming together, counseling is probably one of the biggest puzzle pieces that connects with almost every single program. If a youth is getting services at our agency, they probably need a counselor in addition to whatever else is going on. And I think I'm running a little low on time, so I'm going to speed up a little bit, but these are our delinquency prevention programs. We have our MAP program, Misdemeanant Alternative Program. It used to be called the First Offender Program, but that didn't feel very youth-friendly, and it didn't accurately describe the service. So the primary youth who come to that program were picked up and charged with some sort of an offense, and this is part of their plan, through court orders. But any young person in the community can self-refer to the program. Any parent or grandparent who's caring for a youth, if they feel like their youth is struggling with things that might be leading them to trouble, even if they've never gotten into trouble with the police or with the law yet, can bring those youth to that program to try to help them develop skills to stay out of trouble. So we do individual assessments to figure out what's brought the young person there, and then if there's an individualized treatment plan to help them. For many of these young people, it's a referral to youth court. It's a real court that's ran by youth, teenagers who've been trained by the local bar association, and they're all acting as court officers. So there's a panel of 3 youth judges. There's a youth bailiff, a youth prosecutor, and a youth defender. And they run those courts, and essentially these are sentencing courts because these young people have already been charged and convicted, and now it's just down to their sentencing. And we're leveraging the power of peer pressure in this case because we know as teenagers, young people often care more about what their peers think, especially older peers versus a parent or an unknown authority figure who's an adult. And most of the young people who go through youth court are never seen in juvenile justice again, which is proof that it works. And then also some of those young people have such an impactful experience as a defendant that they ask if they can come back and serve on the court as an officer, which we try our best to make that happen. Whatever sentencing they hand down is upheld by the municipality where the offense occurred, and it often involves restorative justice, thank yous, apologies, repairs to anything that was vandalized. If you stole something, donating money to another organization in the same value of what was stolen, things of that nature. So it's all about restoration. And then finally, for juvenile reentry, this is for young people who have gotten into really significant trouble. They've either committed an offense that was so great that the state said, it's not safe to leave you in the community, we need to place you in a detention institute for youth. Or it's young people who've been on probation and they've failed probation requirements because they've gotten into trouble again or didn't meet the requirements for whatever reason, they end up being placed as well. And what we want to do is make sure that when they get out, they don't reoffend. Because what happens if they reoffend? Well, if they're adults or closer to adults, and depending on their record, they may end up in an adult prison versus a juvenile detention center. We don't want that to happen. We also have sort of as one of our core beliefs that a mistake doesn't have to be the end of the road for you. A mistake can be leveraged to become a learning opportunity. And so we want to work with those young people to help. Our reentry program is wildly successful. In most communities, youth who've been in that level of trouble, who have been placed in an institution, the recidivism rate or the rate at which they reoffend is anywhere from 55 to 60%. For the last 10 years that we've been running this program, our average recidivism rate runs from 9 to 12% a year. And this year we're trending at 9%. And this program is being looked at as a national model to be put in other communities through the Urban Institute. And then this is our last set of programs, and I'll kind of breeze through these pretty quickly. These are primarily about adolescent health and also making sure that every youth has the opportunity to become who they want to be and who they deserve to be. So health education and prevention, That's primarily providing educational services about puberty and adolescence and the changing of your body, providing transportation and appointments to healthcare appointments at Title IX medical clinics, things of that nature. Sexual health awareness, the easiest way to think about that is teen pregnancy prevention. Does anyone want to venture where Oklahoma is nationally versus other communities? We're fourth from the bottom, so not great. But considering when I started this work 10 years ago, I can't remember if we were first or second. So we were either dead last or next to dead last. So improvements been made. To tell you how much improvement's been made in the last 5 years alone, the teen pregnancy rate in Tulsa County, which is the area we serve with these programs, has gone down 60%. So we've been making leaps and bounds. So great work is happening, but more work needs to happen. And often the pushback that we receive in this area is that people think that if you talk to young people about sex, that you're just giving them permission to have sex or encouraging it, when the reality is young people in general, but especially young people, are bombarded by messages about sex. Wherever they go, television, music, movies, at school, wherever. But what we believe is if you give young people good information, they make better choices, and that bears out in the data. So we would just want to help young people to avoid STDs. We want to help young people avoid pregnancy before they're ready. And then we also want to help young people develop good relationship skills. So a big chunk of what's happening in teen pregnancy prevention is actually about relationship building. Deal makers and deal breakers in good relationships, teen dating violence, things like that. So just trying to help young people navigate relationships in a more positive way. And then we have services for LGBTQ youth, and then we have GSAs. In my day, a GSA was called a Gay Straight Alliance. These days, it's just usually called an Equality Club or a Gender Sexuality Alliance. And these are school-based clubs that a faculty member at a school leads at the behest of youth who want to start a club. We provide the technical support, trying to help them have a curriculum focused on leadership skills development and making sure that they're understood and that they're accepted and they have a peer support network to make sure that they're healthy and safe. What we have found with these GSAs, that any school where a GSA is implemented, school-wide levels of bullying go down a whole lot. Not just bullying targeted at LGBTQ youth, but bullying towards everyone, because one of the things that young people learn is that you can be different from each other, you can have different beliefs, you can even believe that the way someone else is living their life might be wrong or doesn't jive with what you believe, but we can still treat each other with love and respect and create a safe space for everyone to coexist. So bullying levels go down a lot, and most importantly for us, again, I said we value all youth. We take that very seriously. We want to make sure young people feel safe and empowered and loved and accepted, no matter who they are. We have a coffee house that's open Saturday nights. That's kind of how we got our start back in 1969. We've maintained that program because although there's no real services happening there, it's a safe, sober space for teens to hang out and have fun together. I volunteer there on occasionally, and one of the first things I noticed, telephones go into pockets and kids interact face to face. It's led by a youth worker who develops all the entertainment and puts all the scheduling together so that it really feels like a teen-owned space. And it's open to anyone in the public who's a teenager. Saturday night, 7 to 11, no charge to get in, and that's sponsored by Quick Trip. And then finally, a Youth Advisory Board. This is the group of young people who are ages 14 to 22 from all over the community who apply to join this program so that they can evaluate our services and our programs and make sure that youth voice is elevated and amplified and a huge part of what's making these programs work. So they tell us when we're going down the wrong path, when there's something we can tweak, when there's something we can do better, when there's issues happening in schools that we're not addressing and that we need to be. And then in turn, we help develop their leadership skills and team building skills. And by the way, if you have a young person in your life, that program is accepting applications through September the 15th. So if you know someone who might be interested, please have them sign up at our website. It's also a great way to get references for scholarships in university and jobs, and just a great way to meet a lot of young people from across the community, a very diverse group of young people they might not otherwise meet. How am I doing on time back there, sir? Okay, so I'll kind of close off and then I'll give you all an opportunity for questions. So in front of you or on your chair, hopefully you found these. This first one is our full list of programs and services. This is our services catalog. So I don't expect that you remembered even a fraction of what all I told you today, but if you hang on to this, you'll know everything that we do, and you'll know how to get help, and you'll know how to find us for more information at yst.org. That's our main website. However, in the last several years, we realized that it can be confusing for youth to come to our website looking for information on how to get help when they're getting information about 990s and annual reports and things about programs from an adult level that's there for our funders and our community members. So we wanted to open a youth portal, and we did. It's ysthelp.com, and that's what this card is that's on your seat. And if you all don't need these, I would encourage you to leave them behind for someone else who might. Maybe y'all could stack them up somewhere where youth could access them or parents of youth could access them. And this youth portal is where young people will go, ysthelp.com, to get help and to find out who they're going to talk to and what services might look like. That's one of the things I really love about it, is like when you click on a program, like say I need to talk to a counselor or I need to talk to somebody, not only are you going to see what the services are, what they're called, and what the requirements are and how to sign up, you're actually going to see the faces and names of the people who are going to help you. So you're not walking blindly into a place, meeting strangers, and you don't know who that is. So you'll get to see who's there. Also, it's available in Spanish because we have a lot of Spanish-speaking youth in our community. So ysthelp.com is the place for young people to go if they need help, and we would love to be able to help them. Parents can go there as well, grandparents. If you know a young person who needs help, that's a great place to just kind of explore and figure out what's available. In closing, I guess I would say no one's an island, no agency's an island. You've heard about 20 different programs that we provide. We still don't do everything. But one of the great things about this organization that I love is that we work really, really closely with community partners. We want to make sure that we know who else is doing work in the realm of youth and family services, and that we have strong connections. And that when a young person, when they think of needing help, they think of us first. Most of the time we're able to help them. If we're not just going to say, hang up and call this number. We're going to work with them to get them to someone specific at another agency who can help them. Likewise, if they're in our office and we're helping them with one thing, but they need additional services, we're going to get on the phone with them and schedule an appointment. Whenever possible, our worker will go with the youth, or they'll come to our office so that they have help getting connected. So it's a great place to go if you need help. If you know a young person in your life who needs help of any kind, please think of us and think of sending them to us. And then finally, if you're looking for volunteer opportunities, we have many. We have opportunities for small groups, sometimes big groups. We usually do better with small groups. It could be as simple as coming to our street outreach center and organizing clothing donations, pulling out things that are for the wrong age group, things that are not in good shape, so those can be donated on somewhere else. And then the things that are the right age range, the right season, youth-friendly attire, sorting, sizing, and hanging those. There's those kinds of opportunities. We talked about the Safe Place program. We're still looking for more volunteers to join up to be a Safe Place responder. We're especially low on males right now, because if there's a male that shows up, we're going to send a male out. If it's a female that shows up, we're going to send a female out. If it's a youth who's non-binary or trans, we'll ask them who they want to come out, and we'll send whoever they want to come out, a male or a female. So if you're looking for a way to help periodically, that's a great way. I'll tell you, there's a little bit of work and effort in the beginning to go through background checks and training and making sure that everyone who applies to work with the young person is safe to be with their young person alone in a car. So the youth safety is first and foremost the most important thing. And then once you're approved and you get on sort of the phone tree, you might just get called once or twice a year or 5 times a year. And you can always say no. If you're not able to go when they call you, the goal is to get someone as quickly as possible. So if you're not available, it's okay to say no. They'll thank you, they'll hang up quickly, and they'll call the next person on the list to try to get someone out to that youth quickly. And then next time there's a young person in your neighborhood looking for help, you might be on the list to be called for that one. In a nutshell, that's who we are, that's what we do. Do any of y'all have questions that I can answer while I'm here? Yes, sir?
How large is your professional staff, and what kind of background are you looking for in your professional
So we have about 100 full-time employees. For those who are direct care providers, most of them are licensed social workers or licensed counselors. And then we're also great at hiring people who are in the middle of their educational process going towards that career path so that we can give them hands-on experience under supervision. And so for those who are getting their licensing, like for a licensed marriage and family counselor, they can get supervision there to receive that credential in addition to their degree while they work with us. And mostly at the master's level, by the way. Yes, sir.
So I'm just curious about how you interface with the Mental Health Association.
Mental Health Association. Yes, they're one of our best and most trusted community partners. They are who we adopted the blended housing model from. When I talked about transitional living program, we used their model. We work very closely with them. There's often a misconception that Mental Health Association is about counseling services. It's primarily housing services and supportive services for people who are experiencing mental health diagnoses. And so we work with them primarily for housing and homeless services. And then all of the service agencies like ours in the Tulsa area that provide homeless services are part of a sort of, I'll just call it a group, A Way Home for Tulsa, which is primarily managed by Housing Solutions. But A Way Home for Tulsa is a collaboration of all these agencies like Mental Health Association and Youth Services of Tulsa. So we come together, meet together, and figure out how we can best serve the community. And most recently, we applied together for a huge grant from the federal government that we were awarded to A Way Home for Tulsa. So the money is being split between different agencies. It's bringing millions of dollars to the Tulsa community to house homeless people, including homeless youth. Yes, ma'am.
What about services for young people in their early 30s that are who need these services?
Sure, so once they're past our cutoff age, we're not able to serve them there, but what we'll do is we'll refer out. Often the first place that we refer is Family and Children's Services, which sounds like it's just children, but it's the entire life stage that they serve. And they also do some homeless work, and of course they do counseling and things like that. So that's usually our first referral source. Depending upon what their need is, we might refer them to call 211. Has anyone heard of 211? Yeah, that's a number that, for those who have not heard, it's a number you can call toll-free 24/7, and there is someone on the other end of the line that can ask you, what do I need help with? Or ask, what do you need help with? And they will guide you to the most appropriate service. So there's a lot of 211 referrals as well. Yes, ma'am.
What percent, how many of these kids come from a home where alcohol and drug addiction is a problem?
I don't know a percentage, but I would say it's pretty high. If we're talking about homelessness, I think the best way I can describe is kind of the three buckets of youth that we see. First, I would say about a third of the young people that come to us experiencing homelessness are LGBTQ, and that attests to them either being kicked out of their home by their parents because of their gender or sexual identity, or they've left home because their home no longer feels safe because of that. Usually it's a being kicked out sort of situation. To kind of show you how that is there's such a disparity there. The total number of homeless youth nationwide, 40% of all homeless youth are LGBTQ. So that just tells you it's a really huge problem, young people being removed from their homes as teenagers because their parents can't accept who they are. Then the next kind of third group of people are young people who were in the foster care system. They aged out, they turned 18, they had not made permanent family connections, had not learned the independent living skills they needed, and they quickly found themselves homeless after getting out of a foster home. And then the last third is really what kind of addresses what you're asking, I think. That third group is a combination of things, but often substance abuse is an issue. And often people think that if you're a youth living on the streets, you're probably an addict. One, that's not true. It can be true, but it's usually not true. And then often people think they're on the streets because they were using drugs. That's usually not the case either. They usually start, if they're using it all, they usually started using as a coping mechanism once they got on the streets, or someone exploited them quickly after they got on the streets. But many of those young people in that third group come from homes where they just couldn't deal with all the problems that were happening at home, many of which were parents that were struggling with alcoholism or some sort of substance abuse. And they just found it would be easier to be on their own than to live at home anymore.
Well, are the family recovery 12-step groups of Alateen or Al-Anon, is that information that's they're given?
I don't know the answer. I would suspect the answer is yes. That would be information that the counselors would provide along, and I'm not a clinical worker, so I don't really know, but I would suspect that's probably a support group that they would get them with. I'm running low on time, so I had to. Nope, it's you, Cheryl.
I'm fascinated by the transition program. I'm assuming that's a pretty unique program, and I'm wondering what kind of interaction is there between the regular tenants and the youth that you all are supporting, or is there?
There is sometimes. So for privacy reasons, no one in the community, in that apartment community, is told that there are youth from Youth Services there. Now they might learn it from the youth themselves, but we maintain their privacy, and we think that's really critical. And it is their apartment, their name is on the lease. We're just providing supportive services and sometimes even rental support. Often the feedback that we get from other people who are not clients, who are in that community with our clients, is learning opportunities for our youth, usually centered around someone's knocking on their door at 10 or 11 or 12 at night and saying, you need to turn your radio down, you need to turn your TV down. And hello, that's a learning opportunity for young people to realize they are living amongst others. It's not just themselves. And usually that goes over really well. We frequently hear from our young people that they've developed an acquaintanceship with some of the people in the apartment complex with them. And when they've disappeared for a few days or gone off somewhere and they come back and someone says, where have you been? I've missed seeing you. Are you okay? Or just checking in on them periodically because they might know their situation. So it tends to be a very supportive kind of situation when they know about them being a service recipient at all. Does that answer your question? Any other questions before I close? Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing your Sunday morning with me. I hope you enjoy the rest of your church services. And if a young person that you know or that you hear of needs help, please remember Youth Services of Tulsa or YST, and please send them our way. Thank you for your attention this morning.